Hi everyone, my name is Heather Georgopoulos, and today we are going to be talking about the topic, the Satanic Panic, and we're going to dive deeper into if the media made the Satanic Panic worse, or if they were just reporting what people believed. So, what is the Satanic Panic? So, it happened mostly in the 1980s and the 90s, and people across the country believed that there were secret satanic cults abusing children and doing awful things, even though there was no real proof. Because of this fear, a lot of innocent people were accused, some even went to jail for years, but later on, a lot of experts said that it was a modern day witch hunt, like the Salem witch trials, but in modern day times. And it was basically just a big moral panic where fear and rumors spread faster than the actual facts. So how did it start? It all started with a book that was published called Michelle Remembers in 1980, and it was written by a psychiatrist and his patient, Michelle Smith. And in the book, Michelle said that under hypnosis, she remembered being abused by a secret satanic cult as a kid. They went on TV shows and people believed them, but there was no real proof, and a lot of it ended up getting debunked later. But it still made people think that there might be satanic cults hidden in every town. And there were police, therapists, and even parents that started looking all over the nation, and that's really when the panic started. So this is how psychology and therapy made the panic worse. So therapists back then used hypnosis to try to make people remember things that may have been suppressed. And the problem was that the hypnosis can actually create false memories, so stuff that really never actually happened. And kids were asked leading questions and sometimes told scary stories by these adults. And when kids started talking about satanic abuse, adults started believing it, even though it wasn't true. And later on, an expert, Elizabeth Loftus, proved that you can actually plant fake memories in people's minds without meaning to. And therapy and psychology didn't realize at the time that they were making the panic worse. Gender roles and the daycare fear. So in the 1980s, a lot more women were joining the workforce, and daycare centers became a lot more common. Some people didn't trust daycare workers, especially because it was a big change from kids staying at home with their moms, and that was just a whole thing back then. It was a whole controversy of sending your kids to daycare. So this fear got twisted, and many of the daycare workers that were women became targets during this panic, and people thought kids might be getting abused at the daycare centers by these women. And that fear was really just about bigger changes in America and family life. Other factors that played a role in this was culture and politics. So there were a lot of other things going on too. Parents were already scared of stranger danger, so the idea that kids could get kidnapped. And politically, the Reagan era was all about family values and warning people about evil influences. Also, church groups talked a lot about Satanism, and horror movies, rock music, and true crime stories like the Manson family murders. Charles Manson was a cult leader, so with that true crime and also reputable politicians and religious organizations made this scare even worse and made it also seem very real. So the media's role in this made it 10 times worse. There was a lot of news coverage on the Satanic Panic, and they covered it in the scariest way possible. Geraldo Rivera was a very famous host at the time, and he did a very big special in 1988 that convinced millions of people that the satanic cults were real. And talk shows like 2020 and Oprah shared survivor stories without fact checking if they were real. Also, local news outlets made it sound like daycare workers were guilty even before trials had even started. And scary stories started boosting all of this propaganda. And it really didn't matter if it was true or not. People believed word of mouth at the time, and they didn't fact check anything. So there were a lot of big cases during the panic. One of them was the McMartin preschool. So 7 people were charged of this. There was no evidence, and it became the longest and the most expensive trial in U.S. history. Kern County was another one. 26 people were wrongly convicted based on false testimonies from kids. Fells Acres Daycare was another one. The Almarut family spent years in prison even though there was no real proof. Kelly Michaels was a New Jersey daycare worker, and he was jailed for 5 years before her conviction was overturned. And then West Memphis, three teenagers were jailed for 18 years just because they looked different, in quotations. Overall, at least 60 wrongful convictions happened during this time, and it ultimately ruined people's lives, all because of a fear. Now, was the media just doing its job? Some people say that the media was just reporting what police were saying and what people were saying, but others can argue that the media didn't fact check enough and made everything sound scarier to get more views and more money. Scary stories sold better on the news, and some journalists actually admitted later that they rushed to judgment and made things worse. The media wasn't the only problem, but it definitely helped spread the panic more. So what happened after all of this? In the 1990s, courts started overturning a lot of the wrongful convictions. The FBI confirmed that there was no real evidence of organized satanic cults, and the media admitted that they had gotten caught up in the panic. Innocent people were freed, but a lot of them actually struggled to live the rest of their lives, and unfortunately, real victims of abuse had a harder time being believed because people were so skeptical about this large global panic that was all false. So why did people believe it? It's easy to say, how can people believe such a crazy story? But it all came from a good place where people just wanted to protect their community and protect their kids. Police backed up a lot of police and experts like psychiatrists, religious leaders, reputable people actually backed up the panic, so it made it sound a lot more believable. And religious beliefs and scary media made satanic cults seem possible as well. And if your whole community is panicking, it's hard to go up there and say, this doesn't make any sense. Then you would sound like the crazy one. So why this still matters, even though this happened decades ago, we still can have moral panics today, and we still do. There's tons of viral hoaxes that spread on social media, and fears spread faster than facts, especially online, especially in today's world where a click of a button can reach so many people. And also, just like back then, fears can target vulnerable groups like LGBTQ plus people of color, and minorities. So I think that we should all slow down and make sure our facts are okay before we make that same mistake again. And that's all. Thank you so much for listening.